The city roared around Everett Shaw like it was trying to swallow the night whole. Yellow taxis splashed through dirty rainwater. Horns blared. Steam curled from a street grate and wrapped around his polished shoes as he stepped off the curb, one hand tight around his phone, his mind still buried in numbers, contracts, and the cold language of money. Then a small cry cut through the noise, thin and trembling, and it made him stop so fast the man behind him cursed under his breath. Near the corner, beneath the weak glow of a flickering street lamp, a woman sat on the sidewalk with two little girls pressed close to her sides. The children were wrapped in coats too thin for the cold. One of them rubbed her eyes with a tiny fist. The woman lifted her head just enough for Everett to see her face through the loose, tangled strands of hair. His heartbeat thudded hard in his chest. It was Sadie Brooks, the girl he had once loved in silence. What had happened to the girl who used to light up every room she walked into? Everett stared at her as the city blurred around him. Sadie looked thinner than he remembered, worn down in a way that made something twist deep inside him. Her cheeks were pale. Her lips were dry. The little girls beside her looked no more than 4, their round faces pinched with hunger and sleep. One of them tugged weakly at Sadie's sleeve. "Mama, my tummy hurts." Sadie bent her head and kissed the top of the child's hair. "I know, baby," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it carried pain that felt years old. "Just hold on a little longer." Everett felt that voice hit him harder than any boardroom fight ever had. He took one slow step closer, then another. He could not make himself turn away. "Sadie," he said. Her head snapped up. For one long second, her tired eyes searched his face without understanding. Then recognition landed. Her expression changed at once. Shock came first, then shame, then something even harder to look at. She looked down fast and pulled the girls closer. "You shouldn't be here, Everett," she said quietly. "Please, just go." The words should have sent him away. Years ago, maybe they would have, back when he had been the quiet boy in the back of the classroom, watching her laugh with other people, too unsure of himself to speak. But he was not that boy now, and she was not someone he could leave on the sidewalk. He crouched in front of her, uncaring of the wet pavement pressing through the knees of his expensive trousers. "What happened to you?" Sadie gave a weak shake of her head. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She let out a small breath that almost sounded like a broken laugh. "Why?" "Because I never forgot you," he thought. "Because seeing you like this feels wrong in a way I can't explain. Because no one should have to hold their children like they are bracing for winter to swallow them." But what he said was, "Because you need help." The other little girl leaned against Sadie's shoulder, too tired even to speak. Her eyelids drooped. Her nose was pink from the cold. Everett looked at both children, then back at Sadie. "Come with me." Her eyes widened. "No." "Yes. I can't. You can." His tone stayed calm, but it carried the kind of firmness that had built companies and closed impossible deals. "You and the girls are not staying out here tonight." Sadie's fingers tightened around the edge of the old blanket covering the twins. Pride battled with fear across her face. Everett could see it. He could almost hear it. The part of her that wanted to survive was fighting the part of her that no longer trusted kindness. He reached into his coat and took out his phone. "My driver will be here in 5 minutes." Sadie swallowed. "Everett, don't do this because you feel sorry for me." His jaw tightened. "I'm doing it because I care." She looked at him then, really looked at him. and for a moment the city noise seemed to fade. He saw the old Sadie behind the exhaustion, the girl with bright eyes and easy laughter, the girl who used to walk down the school hallway like life itself had chosen her. Now she looked like life had done its best to crush her. One of the twins shivered hard, and that decided it. Sadie closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet. "Just for tonight," she whispered. Everett nodded once. "For tonight." A black town car pulled to the curb minutes later. The girls stared at it with wide, silent eyes. Everett opened the rear door himself, then turned back and offered Sadie his hand. She hesitated only a second before placing her trembling fingers in his. That simple touch did something to him he was not ready to name. The ride uptown passed in silence. The city lights streaked across the car windows in long ribbons of gold and red. One twin fell asleep against Sadie's shoulder almost at once. The other curled into her mother's side, thumb tucked near her mouth. Sadie kept glancing at the door as if she still might bolt the moment the car slowed. Everett sat across from her, giving her space, though every part of him wanted to say something that would take the fear out of her face. But some wounds were too deep for words, especially on the first night. When the car finally rolled through the iron gates of his estate on the edge of the city, Sadie stiffened. The mansion stood tall under warm lights, its windows glowing against the dark sky. Stone steps, tall columns, a wide front door polished to a shine. It looked less like a home and more like the kind of place people dreamed about from the wrong side of life. "This is too much," Sadie said under her breath. "No," Everett replied. "This is enough." Inside, the air smelled like clean linen and cedarwood. The twins lifted their heads, blinking at the soft lights and quiet halls. A housekeeper named Mrs. Doyle came forward, surprise flashing in her eyes before kindness took over. "Prepare the East guest suite," Everett said, "and have the kitchen send up something warm. For the children, too." "Of course, Mr. Shaw." Sadie looked overwhelmed. "Everett, really, we don't need all this." He turned to her. "You need safety. You need rest. Let me give you that much." Mrs. Doyle led them upstairs. The guest suite was larger than most apartments, with cream-colored walls, thick carpets, and a bed so soft one of the girls reached out and touched the blanket like she did not believe it was real. The child looked up at Sadie. "Mama, can we sleep here?" Sadie pressed her lips together as tears filled her eyes. "Yes, baby." The little girls climbed onto the bed and sank into it with quiet wonder. Everett stood near the door, his hand resting on the frame. For the first time since he had seen Sadie on the sidewalk, he allowed himself one small breath. Sadie turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" He held her gaze. He did not look away. "Because once," he said softly, "I knew a girl who made the world feel less cold. And I can't stand here now and pretend I don't see what happened to her." Sadie's face crumpled for just a second before she pulled herself back together. "I'm not that girl anymore." Everett looked at the twins curled together on the bed, their eyes already drifting shut. Then he looked back at Sadie. "Maybe not," he said, "but I think she's still in there." He stepped back into the hallway and paused with his hand on the door. Sadie stood in the warm light, tired and guarded, with her daughters finally safe behind her. Everett should have felt relief. Instead, what settled in his chest was something heavier, because bringing Sadie into his home had been the easy part. Finding out who had broken her was where the real story would begin. Sadie did not sleep much that night. even with clean sheets under her and four walls around her daughters. Safety felt too unfamiliar. Every soft sound in the quiet house made her eyes open. Every time she looked at Lily and June sleeping beside each other in the wide bed, she felt both relief and fear twist together in her chest. Relief because they were warm, fear because she still did not trust good things to stay. When morning came, pale sunlight spilled through the curtains and painted the room in soft gold. For a moment, Sadie forgot where she was. Then she saw the high ceiling, the carved dresser, the folded robes at the end of the bed, and memory came rushing back. Everett, the street, his hand reaching for hers. Her daughters waking up hungry in a stranger's mansion. Lily sat up first, hair messy, eyes blinking with confusion. "Mama?" Sadie touched her cheek. "I'm here." June rolled over and rubbed her face. "Are we still in the big house?" Sadie gave a tired smile. "Yes, baby." A knock came at the door a few minutes later. Mrs. Doyle entered with fresh clothes for the girls, simple cotton dresses and warm socks, along with a tray of toast, fruit, and oatmeal. The smell alone made Sadie's throat tighten. "Mr. Shaw asked me to bring this up," Mrs. Doyle said gently. "There's no rush, but breakfast is waiting downstairs, too." After she left, the twins climbed onto the chairs near the tray. June reached toward the strawberries, then stopped. "Mama, is it really for us?" Sadie looked away fast so her girls would not see the tears filling her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "it's for us." They ate with quiet focus, the kind that only came from children who had learned food did not always come when it should. Sadie forced herself to take a few bites too, though guilt sat heavy in her stomach. She did not know how to receive this kind of kindness without feeling like it might be taken back. By the time she brought the girls downstairs, Everett was standing near the dining room window with a cup of coffee in his hand. Morning light caught the sharp lines of his face and the dark sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. He looked less like the hard businessman from last night and more like the boy she half remembered from another life. Only stronger now, more certain. The kind of man the world moved for. He turned when he heard them enter. For a second, his eyes softened at the sight of the girls in clean clothes. "Good morning," he said. Lily stayed half hidden behind Sadie's leg. June held tighter to her hand. Sadie nodded. "Morning." Mrs. Doyle set more food on the table. Eggs, pancakes, bacon, warm biscuits. The twins stared like they had stepped inside a dream. Everett pulled out a chair. "Sit, please." Sadie hesitated, then sat across from him, keeping the girls close. Lily reached for a pancake and then pulled her hand back. "Can I have it?" she asked in a tiny voice. Everett's face changed. It was quick, but Sadie saw it. Something painful flashed through him. "Yes," he said gently. "You can have as much as you want." The girls began eating, slowly at first, then with growing hunger. Sadie could barely swallow her own food. Shame pressed against her ribs. She hated that he had seen them like that. Hated that her daughters had learned to ask permission before eating. Everett leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to be afraid here." Sadie kept her eyes on her plate. "I'm not afraid." He was silent for a moment. "Then what are you?" She looked up and the truth slipped out before she could stop it. "Waiting." "For what?" "For this to end." The room grew still. Even the clink of silverware seemed to fade. Everett set his cup down. "It doesn't have to." Sadie let out a dry laugh. You say that like life listens. He did not smile. No, I say it like I mean it. After breakfast, Mrs. Doyle took the girls to the sunroom, where there were books, blocks, and soft rugs spread near the windows. Sadie watched them go, then stood in the doorway, as if unsure where she was meant to be in a house this large. Everett found her a little while later in the library. She stood by the shelves, fingers brushing the worn spine of an old novel, though she had not turned a single page. He held out a cup of coffee. You used to drink yours with too much sugar. Sadie looked at him in surprise. You remember that? I remember a lot. She took the cup, but her hands stayed tense around it. Everett sat in the chair across from her. Talk to me. Sadie stared into the dark surface of the coffee. About what? About how you got here. She was quiet so long he thought she might refuse. Then she sat down slowly and looked toward the windows. After graduation, I met someone. Her voice was flat at first, like she had told herself this story too many times. His name was Travis Hale. He was older, confident, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say. Everett's jaw tightened. Sadie kept going. At first, he made me feel chosen, like my life was finally beginning. Then I got pregnant. She swallowed. With twins. Everett said nothing, but the silence around him sharpened. He left 2 weeks after I told him, she said. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. And your family? Everett asked softly. Sadie laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father told me I had embarrassed him enough. My mother cried, but she still closed the door. Everett looked away for a moment, as if steadying himself. I worked wherever I could, Sadie continued. Diners, stockrooms, cleaning offices at night. I kept us going for a while. Then the restaurant where I worked shut down. Rent piled up, bills piled up. I sold everything I could. Then there was nothing left to sell. Her voice cracked on the last words. Everett leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his expression dark with anger that was not aimed at her. You should never have gone through that alone. Sadie looked up sharply. But I did. He met her gaze. You shouldn't have. For a moment, something passed between them that felt too old and too fragile to touch. Then Sadie pulled back first. I can't depend on you, she said. Not like this. Why? Because people leave. Her voice was steady now, but only because it had gone numb. Men make promises when things are easy. Then life gets hard, and they disappear. Everett took that in without flinching. I'm not him. Sadie's fingers tightened around the mug. I know. That answer seemed to affect him more than if she had argued. Before he could reply, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out, glanced at the screen, and the warmth in his face vanished. Sadie noticed right away. What is it? Everett stood slowly. Nothing you need to worry about yet. He stepped toward the window and answered in a low voice. Sadie could not hear every word, only pieces. Yes. A pause. No. You listen to me. Another pause, longer this time. His shoulders went rigid. When he turned back, the quiet control in his face had been replaced by something colder. Sadie stood up. Everett. He slipped the phone into his pocket. That was Travis. All the air left her lungs. Her face drained of color. Her hand went to the back of the chair to steady herself. He found out where you are, Everett said. And he says he wants to see the girls. Sadie shook her head before he had even finished speaking. No. Her voice came out broken, but firm. No, he does not get to do that. He does not get to vanish for years and come back when it suits him. Everett stepped closer. I told him the same thing. Sadie wrapped both arms around herself, as though the room had turned cold. Fear moved through her fast and sharp. Not fear for herself, for Lily, for June, for the fragile peace they had only just touched. What did he say? She whispered. Everett's eyes held hers. He said this isn't over. Sadie shut her eyes for 1 second, but it was enough. When she opened them again, the fear was still there. Only now it had a name, and a fight was coming straight toward them. Sadie stood in the middle of the library with her arms wrapped tight around herself. Everett's words still hung in the air like smoke. He found out where you are. He wants to see the girls. He said this isn't over. For one long moment, she could not move. Her mind had already raced ahead to the worst places. Travis at a courthouse. Travis at her door. Travis smiling that same cold smile he used to wear when he wanted control and pretending it was love. No, she said again, this time more firmly. He is not taking them from me. Everett stepped closer, his voice low and steady. He won't. Sadie looked at him, wanting to believe that more than she wanted anything else. But fear had lived in her for too long. It did not leave just because someone spoke kindly to it. You don't know what he's like, she whispered. Then tell me. Sadie took a shaky breath and sat down slowly, as if her knees might give way beneath her. Everett stayed standing for a second, watching her, then pulled a chair closer and sat across from her. When I met him, she said, he knew exactly how to make me feel important. He bought flowers. He opened doors. He talked about the future like it was already ours. Her mouth tightened. But once I needed something from him, once life became real, he changed. Everett said nothing. Sadie stared at the floor. He hated being questioned, hated hearing no. If I asked where he had been, he'd turn it around and make me feel guilty for asking. If I cried, he called me dramatic. If I got upset, he'd disappear for days just to punish me. Everett's jaw flexed. When I told him I was pregnant, he looked at me like I had ruined his life. Her voice trembled now. I never forgot that look. Not once. The room fell quiet. Sadie could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the far wall. She pressed her palms together to stop their shaking. He left me with nothing, she said. And now he wants to come back and play father because he thinks I'm weak. Everett leaned forward. Then we make sure he learns you're not. Sadie lifted her eyes to his. There was no pity in his face, only anger, protection, resolve. That was what finally broke something open inside her. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. I'm tired, Everett. His voice softened. I know. No. She shook her head. I mean tired in my bones. Tired of being scared every time the phone rings. Tired of wondering where my girls will sleep. Tired of carrying everything by myself. He looked at her for a long moment. Then let me help carry it. Sadie lowered her face into her hands, and for the first time in years, she cried in front of someone without trying to hide it. Not the quiet tears of survival, not the silent kind that fell when her daughters were asleep and no one could hear her. These were heavier, older. They came from a place in her that had been holding itself together for too long. Everett did not rush her. He simply sat there until she could breathe again. Then he stood. "I'm making a few calls," he said. "You and the girls are staying here. You're safe." Sadie wiped her face. "Everett," he paused. "Why does it feel like you mean that?" she asked. His expression changed, just slightly. Something deep and unguarded moved through it. "Because I do mean it." By evening, the house had shifted into a different kind of stillness. Not peaceful exactly. Watchful. Mrs. Doyle kept the girls downstairs in the sunroom with puzzles and warm cookies. Everett spent most of the afternoon in his office, speaking to lawyers, investigators, and one private security firm that owed him more favors than he cared to count. Sadie stood in the hallway outside his office once, listening to the low sound of his voice through the door. Calm, controlled, dangerous in the way only a man with real power could be. It should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safe. Later, after Lily and June had fallen asleep in the guest suite, Everett found Sadie standing on the balcony outside the upstairs hall. The city glowed in the distance beyond the trees, soft and gold under the night sky. She did not turn when he stepped beside her. "They're asleep," she said. He nodded. "Good." She drew in a breath of cool air. "Mrs. Doyle told me there are legal papers coming." "There are." Sadie closed her eyes. "So he's really doing it?" "Yes." "And if the court looks at my past?" she asked quietly. "If they see the shelter records, the eviction, the months I had nothing, what then?" Everett rested his hands on the railing. "Then they'll also see what came after. They'll see a mother who never left, a mother who kept her daughters fed however she could, a mother who endured what most people would not survive." Sadie turned to him. "That's not how the world works." "No," Everett said, "but it's how this fight will." She searched his face. "Why would you go this far for me?" The question stayed between them, honest, bare. Everett looked out into the dark for a moment before answering. "Because I loved you once," he said. "And I think part of me never stopped." Sadie's breath caught. He finally faced her fully. "Back then, I was a kid with no courage. I watched you from a distance. I told myself it was enough just to be near you." He gave a tired smile. "It wasn't." Sadie could not speak. "I'm not saying you owe me anything," he continued. "You don't. I'm not helping you because I expect something back. I'm helping because the thought of you hurting out there while I had the power to change it." He shook his head once. "I couldn't live with that." Her chest tightened so hard it hurt. For years, love had meant conditions, demands, weakness used against her. But this did not feel like that. This felt quiet, steady, like a hand held out and not forced into hers. Sadie looked down. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it tonight." A few days later, the legal papers arrived. Travis was petitioning for custody. The words on the page made Sadie feel sick. Her daughters' names were written there in cold black ink, as if they were something to be claimed, something to be won. Everett took the papers from her trembling hands and read them without changing expression. Then he folded them once and set them on the table. "We fight," he said. And they did. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Everett's attorneys built the case piece by piece. They uncovered Travis's debts, his lies, the women before and after Sadie, the money he owed, the unstable work history he had tried to hide. Every ugly truth he had buried was brought into the light. At the same time, Everett helped Sadie rebuild her own footing, not with charity, with structure. A job interview at one of his publishing offices in Manhattan for an administrative role he knew she could handle. A furnished apartment, leased in her own name. A childcare plan for the girls. A bank account. A routine. At first, Sadie resisted every step, ashamed of how much help she needed. But Everett never pushed in a way that made her feel small. He simply stood there, calm and certain, until she found the courage to take the next step herself. The day she got the job, she stood outside the building holding the offer letter with both hands. "I did it," she whispered, almost like she was afraid saying it too loudly would make it disappear. Everett smiled at her from beside the car. "Yes, you did." Sadie looked down at the paper, then back at him. "You knew I could." "I did." Something warm passed through her then. Not because he had rescued her, but because he had seen her clearly, even when she could not see herself. The custody hearing came on a gray Thursday morning. The courtroom was cold, all polished wood and sharp echoes. Sadie sat beside her lawyer with her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Across the room, Travis wore an expensive suit and the same practiced charm that had once fooled her. But it did not fool her now. Everett sat right behind her. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence was enough. Travis's lawyer tried to paint Sadie as unstable, homeless, unfit, a woman who could not provide. Then Everett's team answered with records, timelines, statements, and facts. Sadie had never abandoned her daughters. Sadie had never stopped working. Sadie had taken every blow life gave her and kept going. Travis, on the other hand, had disappeared the moment responsibility found him. He had offered no support, no money, no care, no love. And now, buried inside the evidence Everett's investigator had gathered, were records that destroyed the image he had tried to wear in court. Debt. False statements. Threatening messages. Patterns of control. By the time Sadie was called to speak, her fear had burned into something steadier. She stood, faced the judge, and told the truth. Not perfectly, not with polished words, but with the kind of honesty that carries its own weight. "I was poor," she said, voice shaking at first. "I was scared. There were nights I didn't know where my daughters would sleep. But I never left them. I never stopped being their mother. I never stopped trying." The courtroom was still. "I'm not asking for pity," she said. "I'm asking the court to see what is true." He left. I stayed. When the ruling came, Sadie felt like she had stopped breathing. Then the judge awarded her full custody. Just like that, the world shifted. Travis's request was denied. Supervised visitation was refused. A restraining order was granted after the court reviewed the evidence of intimidation and neglect. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Sadie stood on the stone steps with tears spilling down her face. Not because she was weak, because the weight she had carried for years had finally begun to lift. Lily and June ran into her arms the moment Mrs. Doyle brought them forward. "We going home, Mama?" June asked. Sadie held both girls tight. "Yes, baby." When she lifted her head, Everett was standing a few feet away, watching them with quiet relief. He had given her everything he promised: safety, help, a chance to stand again. She walked over to him slowly. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Everett shook his head. "You don't have to." Sadie smiled through tears. That's where you're wrong. He looked at her, waiting. She reached for his hand. It was a small thing, simple, but it said what she still did not fully know how to speak. That night, after the girls fell asleep in their new apartment, Sadie stepped onto the balcony and found Everett there, leaning against the railing, city lights behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sadie said, "When you told me you loved me once, I didn't know what to say." Everett's gaze held hers. "You still don't have to say anything." She walked closer until only a breath of space remained between them. "But I want to," she whispered. His expression softened. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I still don't know how to trust that good things stay. But when I look at you, I want to try." Everett lifted a hand and touched her face so gently it almost broke her all over again. "You won't have to try alone," he said. Sadie let out a shaky breath that turned into the smallest laugh. "That sounds like something I could get used to." Then she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not a dramatic kiss. It was better than that. Slow, careful, full of relief and tenderness and the quiet promise of something real. 1 year later, summer sunlight spilled across the little backyard behind Sadie's townhouse in Brooklyn. Lily and June ran through the grass chasing bubbles, their laughter bright and free. Flower boxes lined the porch rail. Wind moved softly through the curtains of the open kitchen window. Sadie sat on the porch steps with a glass of lemonade in her hand. Everett came out behind her and sat beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. She leaned into him without thinking. That was how she knew love had become home. Not in grand speeches, not in rescue, but in the small things. In school lunches packed before dawn, in bedtime stories, in legal papers long forgotten in a drawer, in a man who stayed, in children who no longer asked if they were allowed to eat. Sadie watched her daughters run through golden light and smiled. A year ago, she had been sitting on cold pavement with fear in her chest and nowhere left to go. Now she had a porch, a home, a future. And beside her sat the man who had once loved her in silence and then loved her loudly enough to help save her life. Everett slipped his hand into hers. She held on. If you believe stories still matter, go ahead and hit subscribe, Stories Beyond the Porch. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Thanks for watching.